Danny Greenberg on the telephone with me. Danny, this CD release of yours, Morning Song, has definitively, I think, a folk music taste. Tell me about that.
Yeah, there's absolutely no doubt that there's some serious folk influences on this album. I would say all my music, I kind of think of all my songs as stories. So all the chord progressions and finger-picking patterns of classic, like Southern roots music and folk music and Dylan and Guthrie and all those guys, all that really helps to tell stories and narratives. And I find that that's the best way to tell the stories that I want to tell. So that ends up being a lot of the forms in terms of song form for the songs on my album.
I send my troubles on their way on this brand new day. And so return the birds. They've come to say hello, and they don't need any words to speak of what they know, for they learned it on the wind. Time it shall rescind, that today is just tomorrow after yesterday on this brand new day.
We've got an artist here by the name of Lucian Smith, Danny, but I see an instrument called the mellotron. Tell me about the mellotron.
So the mellotron came about because we were recording the track I See the Light, which is a real kind of like old school feel good pick me up song on our album that we had on track 8, which is a point you really need in an album to pick the album back up and bring some forward moving momentum. And we wanted on the bridge, I was saying, I wish we had a whole like choir here to sing some Oz over these chord changes of the bridge. And our producer, John, said, we might not have a choir, but we have the mellotron. We were all like, what the hell is a mellotron? It turns out a mellotron is one of those old keyboards they used to use back in the 60s on those old albums. Zeppelin used it a lot, bands like that, where it has slides of almost like film, and each of the slides have a different instrument on them. And when you press the chords down on the keyboard of the mellotron, it makes the sound of the instrument or the choir in this case. And it was just so wild. And we had never seen one before. And John pulled out this big box, it's like 5 feet wide, and he pulls it open, and all of a sudden we see the keyboard and the film, and he switches the film out, and we go to record the track, and I'll never forget the first time seeing Lucian's hands press down on the E major chord and hearing a choir sing. It was wild.
It's been so dark for so long, I just kept moving on. Now that it's right where it was wrong, I hear that morning song.
And one of the musicians on your album is Emily Shankman. And, of course, you don't say violin, you say fiddle. Tell me about Emily Shankman.
Sure. Emily and I have known each other a long time. We actually both went to the Boston Conservatory. So we met back in Boston. And at actually the last audition I ever went to as an actor, it was for a musical called Once. And in that show, you have to come in playing an instrument for the audition. And I had no idea that she played fiddle all these years when I was writing all these songs. And I was in a room practicing with my guitar, and she came in and started fiddling and blew my mind. And when we went to record the album, I asked her to be a part of it, and she became part of the album and then part of the band. And I couldn't be more grateful because not only is she a really good player, and she comes up with really, really ingenious little melodies, but she's a really smart storyteller, which you could see on the song What We Had, which is kind of like an ode to childhood. If you listen closely, the parts she plays in between the verses are nursery rhymes or songs like Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star and Halftime. So she really not only plays the right notes, but the smart notes. She really is telling the story, which is the biggest thing that we set out to do as performers and as players.
But I still remember the nights we spent, and it kinda makes me sad. Those nights of wine, they gently wind. No, we knew not what we had.
Well, one of the key musicians, and a lot of times we hear them in the background, but actually they're very important because they keep the music together. The bass player is John Davis, and the drummer is Dave Burnett.
John Davis and Dave Burnett were a huge part of this album. You know, they both really held down the grooves of all the songs, and they brought so much experience that they've had over the years in the studios and on the road to the process and taught us all so much. And I think one of the coolest things about John is that he has such amazing versatility with the way he plays. Some of the tracks were electric and some of them were upright, double bass. And the coolest thing was when he started bowing, because originally I had written parts for, like in the song Canada, I originally wrote a part for a cello, and we didn't have a cellist. So what he ended up doing was bowing the bass an octave higher than he typically would bow, and all of a sudden you get this sound that it sounds like there's a whale in the room. It's amazing. It just erupts. And you get the sound of the octave up that sounds like a cello, but with a little more depth to it, it was just a stunning sound in person, and I couldn't be more happy with how that came across on the album.
Oh Canada, oh can't you tell, or tell me that I hide it well. I see your face, it goes to hell. I slipped and I'm afraid I fell. Oh Canada, can't you see what your stares do to me? Your maple eyes, they paralyze me. Oh Canada, can't you see?
Danny, you've got a mandolin player there, Ian Peters. Tell me where the mandolin is featured.
The mandolin is all over the album. You can hear it on almost every track. I would say one of the biggest moments of it being featured would be on the song Where Your Love Used to Be. He's actually playing the solo on that tune.
I let time rescind, I left you to the past. Well, once you were love, but love, it couldn't last.
Your album, Morning Song, is, well, basically compared to other CDs, is just very basic. It's got some beautiful artwork. And then it says, recorded at Bunker Studios, Williamsburg, Brooklyn, New York. That's it. And then it's got the song listing. Who's distributing this album? How are you getting it into folks' hands?
When I set out to do the album, I was by myself. I was doing it all on my own, and I had to work 7 days a week to make it happen. And that was for a year and a half. And then luckily, after I recorded the album, it got in the hands of an amazing man named Max Horowitz, who works at Crossover Media, and I believe that's how it ended up in your hands. And he's been sending our music out to radio stations around the country and even in Canada, and it's starting to be played, and it's really been a blessing. And it's people like you who play it, and people like you who are listening, who allow us to keep making music and telling stories. And I always say, you know, we never know if when a tree falls in the forest, if it makes a sound, if there's no one there to hear it. But it's certainty that if there's no one to hear a song, it doesn't make a sound.
Well, I'm finding out have you something to show? Or is the way just turned till one day you just run out of road? Or do we finally learn life returns that from which we are owed? And the questions from which we all hide are the answers left somewhere inside? Or is the answer, the point is besides that from which you set out? Well, I'm finding out